Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of our BFA Artist Talk series here at the Western Gallery at Western Washington University. My name is Tammy Landis. I am the curator and museum educator here at the Western Gallery, and I'm sitting here with Rachel Rothberg, painter, who will be interviewing today, moderating the conversation, and I will introduce Rachel here in a moment. But few housekeeping things. First of all, so glad you've joined us. And if you're watching us on Zoom, please use that Q&A feature to chime in. If you have any questions or comments that you would like us to address, or Rachel specifically, while we have Rachel here, please do take advantage of that time, because we're thankful to have Rachel here. You know, having the living artist present with us is really important, and we want to make sure we take advantage of it. So go ahead, put in your questions, comments, and after about 20 minutes of conversation, my colleague Chris is going to notify me, and I'll help guide those questions to Rachel, and we'll talk through those. And that's about it. So most of this will just be a conversation between myself and Rachel, and chime in as needed. And feel free to comment and say how awesome Rachel is and their work, because they've done a lot and they've accomplished a lot this year. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So Rachel, it's a pleasure to be sitting here with you. Congratulations to be sitting in front of your completed BFA series of works. You did it.
I did it.
You did it. You're on the other side of it. There's no more planning for this exhibition. It's done. So congratulations on completing this.
Thanks, Tammy.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to work with you on this, and now I'm really excited to chat with you about your work. I remember very specifically Rachel's conversation with me when we did a virtual studio visit some time ago, and I was left asking lots of questions. So it's been great to, experience your works firsthand, but then see the process of them over time. So there's a lot to chat about. So why don't we start, Rachel? Why don't you just describe what we're looking at? Tell us a little bit about the process, the materials that you've chosen to use, the scale of these works, just to give our audience a little bit more of a background information since they're not here with us.
Yeah, so these are 4 acrylic paintings, 4 oil paintings, and they're all 6 feet wide. Numbers and materials.
Yeah.
But the way that I create them is I take these reference photos of these deceased birds that I've either found or people have notified me, and I surround them in native plants, and I bring in some other foliage that fits the color scheme that I'm aiming for, and I project those reference photos onto these 6-foot canvases that I've built. And I work in a lot of layers of oil paint using different thickness of the paint. So if you're a painter, you know that the paint goes on thin to thick, and you're just adding more and more layers to bring that realism in.
Mm-hmm. And these have taken a long time.
Yes.
For you, right. I remember something that stood out to me was the time it took each piece to be created, first of all, but then you describing the process of that time being significant to you. You didn't want work that was just quick and easy, mm-hmm. right? Can you describe that a little bit? Describe the process and how much time it took and why that time, elapsed important to you in terms of, the themes that you're hitting on in your works.
Yeah, so all of these paintings have so many layers, and each of those layers takes so many hours. I don't even know how many hours. I've listened to so many audiobooks while I've painted.
Yeah.
So I'll have to do the math later.
Measured in podcasts,
right?
And audiobooks.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's good.
But I think that it's at least got to be a few hundred hours of the entire series. But that time is really important because it's almost like a meditative practice to give these birds the attention that I really think they deserve. So yeah.
And something else I was thinking about, and I think that's really powerful, is the themes of grief, mortality, loss that is really present when you're experiencing these works, even without knowing you, without reading your artist statement. You can kind of get a sense of that.
Mm-hmm.
You call these funerary portraits or burial portraits, and most people think of a human relationship with
right.
that. So I'd love to hear more, about this reverence that you've attributed to these birds. And I think it's also great for everyone to hear, how you take care of these birds once they're given to you,
yeah.
and the attention you give them.
Yeah, I mean, so it really starts out just like a text or a call, someone saying like, Rachel, I found a dead bird on the side of the road.
Yeah.
And I usually will just like drive over and pick it up and then like put it in a shoebox or like outside my studio. And I'll really like spend hours like trying to curate this like perfectly manicured like landscape of flowers and foliage. And yeah, I think that it's been really nice to spend so much time with these birds. And then after I've painted them or after I'm done using like the bird's body, I'll give it a burial, which is nice to kind of close the circle and give them the same kind of reverence that you would want to give a human.
It truly is full circle. It's like not only are you painting them in a reverent light, but you're also literally burying them and like giving them care that wouldn't normally happen with these
and that
birds.
like that behind the scenes kind of like I take care of the birds is also like expressed through the paintings, like you were saying. I have really tried to like perfect the way that I've brought these paintings like larger than life, so that you're confronted with like this tiny bird that you would probably, if you just saw a bird on the ground, like dead or alive, like you would probably, most people would just be like, oh, bird, like, oh, it's sad if it died. But I have spent like way more hours than probably most people would think about a dead bird in their life.
It really captures the nuanced beauties of the individual birds that you've decided to represent too, because you're looking at them on such a larger scale, right? Like the typical scale of a bird we can hold in our hand. When you're looking at these works, you're staring face to face and they're larger than life and they feel monumental. So you've really put them on a different platform than what we're used to seeing. So it really accelerates, you know, the themes that you're trying to address and navigate through. The birds in particular, tell us about that. I know that these kind of stumbled upon you, but talk about these birds, but then also the work that you were doing before your BFA paintings. I know you were also doing things with regional specific birds and talk about that a little bit.
I mean, I grew up in California where there's a lot of different biodiversity. I was in the Bay Area. And so it was really wonderful to always be surrounded by like these different kinds of birds. And I am really interested in ornithology, the study of birds. And I even came to Western wanting to be an ecology major. And after an entire 3 years realized that painting is what's for me. So I ended up getting a biology minor and my BA and BFA in studio art. But it was really great to like be able to find these, like have these birds come to me in like a local sense. So my paintings and like my research is really place-based. So I have like gone to different places and found these different like interconnected relationships between the animals and their environments, and that like is something that has always inspired me with like this work and previous work like since I can remember.
I think it really is clear, you know, when people come and experience this, that you do have a scientific background, because your attention to the foliage, also the birds, I mean, it doesn't feel like just a typical someone painting these birds. Like there is a different nuance to it that communicates the sciences, you know? So I think you've achieved that really well in connecting your interests. So I think we should share a little bit about the titles, because I think that's a really important part of your work and how it's exhibited too, right? And we can talk about kind of the setting that it's in this corner and how you want people to experience it. But why don't you share with us the title?
Right, yeah. So all of these paintings are titled after movements from Mozart's Requiem, which, I mean, if you don't know Mozart, he's just like the most prolific composer, like if you're just naming people off the top of your head. But famously, he composed the Requiem and he died while he was composing it. So there's already, and the Requiem is made, it was commissioned for someone's funeral. And so there's this intrinsic like meaning of death behind those pieces. And then in addition to being a biologist and a painter, I'm also a singer.
Exactly.
So collect them all, I guess. But 2 years ago, I had the privilege of singing Mozart's Requiem in Western's concert choir. And we performed the entire like 1.5 hour long piece.
Yeah, it's long.
It's quite long,
Yeah,
but
exhaustive.
it's like this huge mass that was composed for this man who died. And it has all of these other ties of death within it because Mozart did die while he was composing it. And because it was like the hardest piece that I've ever sung in a choir, and it was also just like really meaningful to me and moving because of like my fascination with death and grief and loss and like the way that that has popped up in my life. And so I think that piece has really stuck with me over time. And I really wanted that connection of like just the way that humans have always thought about death to be like palpable in these pieces. And so each of the pieces is titled after one of the movements. There's 12 movements in the Requiem, so I guess I have more paintings to do. But this one is titled Requiem, which is after the entire piece. This one is Lacrimosa, which translates to sorrow or weeping or tearful. This is Lux and Aeterna, which one piece is called Lux Aeterna, which means like light perpetually.
Super meaningful. I mean, and that adds so much more complexity. And I don't think I knew that your original performance of that was at like a funerary setting. That's really powerful. So I know we have a question, but before we do that, on this topic of the performance, I do want you to share, you know, your vision for this space to come alive and to activate it through performance. Can you share about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I recruited some of the members of the original choir I performed Mozart's Requiem with, and we'll have a quartet of singers that includes myself. I'll be the alto, and we will be standing in front of these pieces and performing those 3 movements that these 4 paintings are named after. And I hope that will really like further that deep connection between like the past and like memento mori and also this interdisciplinary interconnected way of like thinking about death and thinking about like our local like biological connections.
That's so powerful. I think future, if you're ever able to in an exhibition have music accompanying your work, you know, an opportunity, even like headphones or like there's different things you can do, but that would be really powerful. Or even, you know, have a note, encourage people to scan something and listen to a performance, because I think that really adds to the life of the works or the death of these works, right? Like the full circle of what's going on here. So I know, Chris, that we do have a question. I want to make sure we can get to some of those. So why don't you go ahead and read one of them, please?
What inspired your interest in birds?
Oh man, I think I've been interested in birds for the longest time. My mom used to say that I was always like really interested in anything with more or less than 4 legs when I was like younger than 2. But I have always loved like being outside and being in nature. Like I would just always, you could always find me outside and barefoot. But I think that birds are particularly interesting to me because I don't know, there's like a perfect amount of like biodiversity. They're everywhere. They're on every continent. They're the only like families of creatures that's on every continent. And I think there's just like so much endless fascination to be discovered in like all of birds. They're great.
Spoken like a true biologist. I know we have another question. Let's dive into that.
If you move to a place other than the Northwest, would you still choose to paint these species of birds and plants? Or another way of saying is you're painting place-based or based on a sense of home or familiarity?
Yeah, I mean, to me, Washington is not my original home. So it's definitely more place-based. And as I like linger in a location longer, I think I develop like a more personal connection to the biodiversity there. So this is my 5th year like living in Washington and existing around these species. And some of them are the same ones as in California, but it's definitely place-based. I'm really interested in going to other locations and even doing residencies to just exist in a different space and form these new connections with these birds that I think are really endlessly fascinating.
I think that's a fantastic next step. And any of you that are listening in that are in undergrad, interested in getting a BFA, or even, you know, interested in MFA and career as an artist, residencies are huge. And Rachel's work that is so site specific is kind of like the perfect situation to travel and go to different residencies, that you can dive into that space, that landscape, and really hone in on that. That's what those communities really want. They want outside people to come in and see their space in a different way. So there's a lot of potential there. Chris, I think we have maybe one or two other questions as well.
There are a couple more.
Great.
Have you ever considered painting portraits of birds that have been deceased for a longer amount of time? For example, the skeleton of the bird or somewhere in between the decomposition states?
Yeah, that's a super great question. It's something that I even like explored this year when it was like winter quarter and I was taking experimental drawing, and that's when I like painted this like dark-eyed junco that had been decomposing, and like every week I would unbury it and then draw it again and like layer the drawings. And so it was definitely, I mean, it was experimental drawing, so I was really just trying out these new ideas. But yeah, I think that dealing with like the abject or like the not necessarily like something you would want to look at is interesting to me. But the reason like that I've gone back, like even after experimenting with like the more ugly death, like ugly
the reality,
I always go back to like the making these birds almost seem like alive in their death, even though like they are, I think they're quite obviously dead because these are not positions that they might normally be in. But but some folks have even like questioned if they are dead, and I think that that really speaks to like how important it is for me to like revere these birds. I don't want them to be seen as like that they've been in like an accident, because in like a human's funeral you would want to make sure that they're seen as like their peak. Like, we always like take care of someone's body before we like put it on display.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I think that was a really great point. I think that was a fascinating parallel.
It is.
Or another trajectory for you. I think we have another question, Chris.
Can you expand on the color choices you made for each painting? Are they based on formal or symbolic issues?
Yeah. So you'll notice that each of the paintings are pretty varied in color in relation to each other. And each painting within itself uses a complementary color scheme. So like yellow is paired with violet and blue is paired with orange. And it's been important for me to like not only have diversity between the bird species and like the way that they've been laid out, but to also have like a variety of color. Color plays a really important role in like how you feel. So like the Lacrimosa piece, the one with like the water droplets and the purpley blue flowers, that was important for me to like make the overall colors like darker and cooler to like get that mindset. And then Luke's is like yellow and bright and light, and because it's named for light, so it's all intentional.
Absolutely. I think the colors are really indicative. We have another question, I believe, Chris.
Yes. And it's one I know, Tammy, you've asked in some of the other interviews as well. So it's a good question. These paintings are so beautifully executed. What do you hope the viewer leaves with in seeing your work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that everyone has a different relationship with nature, and everyone has a different relationship with loss and grief, if they have experienced it in various ways. And my hope is to just have people have like a tender experience looking at these birds. When Tammy and I are sitting here, there's usually a bench here, so you can sit and see the paintings, and they're purposefully in this corner so that you can kind of be shrouded in like this peaceful sort of place, even though you're seeing something that's kind of heartbreaking and sad. And I guess what I hope people would come away with is for the same sort of empathy that I feel towards like even the smallest creatures, because of their importance to the ecology, the local ecology.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we haven't expanded a ton on, but with your undergrad in biology, you clearly are important. You clearly emphasize the environment and man's relationship with nature too. I think that's something that has stood out to me in your
Definitely.
work. That's a conversation that is very fluid in what you're articulating. I think we do have another question. Go ahead, Chris.
Yes, yes. This is sort of two-part question. When you see something, how do you know that it's something you want to paint? When you first started out with this series, how did you arrive at these concepts and compositions?
Big question.
Yeah, that's a broad question, but I'll try to answer it as best as I can. I think that what's striking for any painter to paint is just, it all depends on like their identity and their life experiences. So for me, it's been really important to paint these birds because I don't think I could like walk past a dead bird without like really looking at it and really feeling something for it. So these paintings have arisen because I want everyone else to feel like the same sort of empathy and compassion that I feel, because it's blown up and like hours and hours have been spent on it. I think that it is probably more likely to catch someone's eye than like a small bird on the side of the road. Yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. And I think that's something that's really significant, especially in this exhibition, Material Mind with BFA artists. Often there's so many parallels with the ideas of identity formation and who you are that plays out into the culminating bodies of work that you all create. And I think you've done that here very successfully. Like, I think someone who knows you would be able to walk in a gallery and be like, oh, that's Rachel's work.
Yeah.
I know Rachel. I know that Rachel would totally do that. That's, I think that's a really significant part. And I think it's also very successful in your work because it's a state of vulnerability, to put out there the things that mean a lot to you and that are significant to you. Like you've shared, how you feel about loss and death. And so you put it out there through artwork. And I think that's really profound and makes this very rich for everyone to experience as well. So Rachel, thank you for sharing. We're actually already at time, which is crazy. I want to keep chatting, but I do hope all of you, if you haven't already, please come in, make an appointment and come sit on the bench and experience Rachel's work and really soak in the painting, walk around each of the paintings, notice the details, and spend some time with each of these paintings because it's a really profound body of work. Congratulations, Rachel. You've done a really great job. And I know I'm speaking for myself and others. We're all really excited to see what you do next. And I do hope you find some great residencies that offer, completely new ideas for you and propel you forward.
Thank you, Tammy.
Yeah,
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone. Tune into our following artist talks. We have another painter following, and then we have 2 more tomorrow, and that's it. Hope to see you all there.